He's innocent, but still on death row, a prison documentary that will shock you. Like, subscribe, and comment if you can handle the truth, because once you hear the story, there's no turning back, and the system you trust may never look the same again. The sirens were already fading when the body was found, half submerged in the muddy banks of the Brazos River, just outside a quiet Texas town that prided itself on church bells and Friday night lights. Dawn peeled back the darkness, revealing a crime scene that felt staged, too clean, too deliberate. The victim, a young white woman named Emily Carter, had vanished 3 days earlier. Now she was back, silent, her hands bound, her shoes missing. The town exhaled in fear. Within hours, the pressure to find a killer turned suffocating. News vans crowded the courthouse steps. Parents pulled their children indoors. And in the middle of that panic, police found their answer: Marcus Hill. 26 years old. Black. Quiet. A former warehouse worker who lived 2 blocks from Emily's apartment. He had a minor record, the kind that made detectives stop listening once they thought they'd found their man. Marcus said he didn't know Emily. Said he'd been home the night she disappeared. Said no one had knocked on his door. None of it mattered. A neighbor claimed she saw a man, who looked like him, near the river. A jailhouse informant swore Marcus had confessed during a late-night card game. And when detectives interrogated him for 14 straight hours, they walked out with a statement he barely recognized as his own. The trial moved faster than anyone expected. Evidence was thin, but the narrative was strong. A dangerous man. A defenseless victim. A town demanding closure. The jury took less than 4 hours to convict. When the judge read the sentence, death by lethal injection, Marcus didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just kept shaking his head, whispering the same words over and over. I didn't do this. Years passed behind concrete walls and steel doors. Marcus watched men around him lose their minds waiting for execution dates that crept closer like shadows. Appeals were denied. Witnesses vanished. Files gathered dust. And then, one night, a prison guard slid an envelope through the bars of his cell. Inside was a single page from the evidence log, something never shown to the defense. A sealed bag labeled, "Unknown male DNA," collected from the victim's fingernails. But the name attached to the test result wasn't Marcus Hill. The envelope changed everything, but it also made Marcus Hill a target. On death row, information was currency, and innocence was dangerous. Marcus read the lab report again, and again under the dim prison light, his hands trembling. The DNA profile was partial, but clear enough to exclude him completely. Someone else had fought Emily Carter in her final moments. Someone else had left skin beneath her fingernails. For the first time in 8 years, hope felt real. And that made it fragile. Marcus mailed copies of the document to every legal aid organization he could find. Weeks passed. Silence. Then one afternoon, his name echoed through the tier, followed by the sound every death row inmate feared: guards moving faster than usual. Instead of the execution chamber, Marcus was taken to a private visitation room. Waiting for him was a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a stack of folders pressed to her chest. Her name was Laura Bennett, an investigative journalist turned innocence advocate. She'd seen the DNA report by accident, buried in a clerk's supplemental filing that was never indexed. According to official records, the test had been deemed inconclusive and quietly ignored. Laura knew that lie well. She'd uncovered it before. Cases where evidence didn't disappear, it was simply buried deep enough that no one looked twice. As Laura began pulling trial transcripts, the case started to rot from the inside. The eyewitness who claimed to see Marcus near the river had failed 2 earlier lineups. The jailhouse informant had received a reduced sentence weeks after testifying. The interrogation tape revealed hours of coercion, promises, and threats never disclosed to the jury. Every pillar holding up the conviction began to crack. Then the danger escalated. One night, the prison went into lockdown. Guards rushed Marcus out of his cell after an anonymous note warned he was talking too much. In another part of Texas, Laura's car was broken into. Nothing was stolen, except copies of Marcus's files. Someone didn't want this case reopened. As Laura dug deeper, she found something even worse. The unknown DNA profile wasn't new. It had been entered into a national database years earlier and matched a man arrested twice for violent assault near the same riverbank. His name had appeared in internal emails between detectives, emails the defense never saw. The man was never questioned about Emily Carter's murder. The closer Laura got to exposing the truth, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a decision, a choice to protect a conviction rather than find a killer. And as Marcus waited in his cell, execution date looming closer, Laura realized something chilling. If they could do this to him, how many others were already dead? And worse, how many were still waiting? The state struck back the moment the truth got too close to daylight. Laura Bennett filed an emergency motion to reopen Marcus Hill's case, attaching the suppressed DNA evidence, the hidden email trail, and sworn statements from experts who called the original conviction unsupportable. The response was immediate and cold. The district attorney's office dismissed the findings as procedural noise, arguing that reopening the case would re-traumatize the victim's family and undermine public confidence in the justice system. Behind closed doors, pressure mounted. Marcus's execution date was moved up. On death row, time compresses. Every sound feels louder. Every door feels final. Marcus stopped sleeping. He replayed the night of Emily Carter's disappearance again and again, trying to remember anything, any detail, that could save his life. He wrote letters to his mother he wasn't sure would ever be mailed. He memorized the faces of the guards, wondering which one would be there at the end. Laura wasn't backing down. She tracked down the man tied to the DNA, Caleb Monroe, a drifter with a history of assault who'd lived less than a mile from the river at the time of the murder. When Laura requested his file, she discovered something unsettling. Portions were missing. Arrest logs vanished. Interview notes redacted beyond recognition. Then came the call that nearly broke the case wide open. A retired detective from the original investigation agreed to speak, off the record. His voice shook as he explained how the case unfolded. The town was panicking. The mayor wanted an arrest. The department wanted quiet. When Marcus Hill's name surfaced, the pressure stopped. And when the DNA didn't fit, the order came from above to keep the focus where it belongs. Once you put a man on death row, the detective said, admitting you're wrong feels worse than killing him. Days before the execution, a federal judge issued a temporary stay, citing serious constitutional concerns. The prison went silent. Reporters flooded back to the courthouse. Protesters gathered outside the gates. For the first time, the state had to answer questions it couldn't deflect. But the most devastating revelation was still to come. Laura obtained a sealed affidavit from a former prosecutor involved in the case. In it, he admitted he'd known about the DNA mismatch before trial and chose not to disclose it. As Marcus sat alone in his cell, staring at the concrete wall where men counted their final days, the truth was finally undeniable. He was innocent, and the system had known it all along. The final hearing lasted less than an hour, but it carried the weight of 14 stolen years. Marcus Hill was brought into the courtroom in shackles, his prison uniform hanging loose on a body thinned by waiting. Across the aisle sat Emily Carter's family, faces hardened by grief and confusion. They had been told for years that justice was already done. Now, they were being asked to watch it unravel. Laura Bennett stood as the judge read the findings into the record. The suppressed DNA evidence. The coerced confession. The undisclosed deals with witnesses. The affidavit from the former prosecutor admitting he had violated the law to protect a conviction. Each word landed like a controlled detonation, exposing a system that had nearly executed an innocent man. The judge didn't raise his voice when he spoke. He didn't need to. The conviction of Marcus Hill is hereby vacated, he said. All charges are dismissed. For a moment, the room didn't react. Then Marcus collapsed into his chair, hands covering his face, as 14 years of death row fear poured out in silent sobs. He wasn't free yet, not really, but he was alive. And that mattered more than anything. Outside the prison gates, the sun felt unfamiliar. Marcus took his first steps as a free man while cameras flashed and microphones crowded in. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He spoke quietly, his voice steady but heavy. "They were going to kill me for something I didn't do," he said. "And I'm not the only one." The state never admitted wrongdoing. The prosecutor named in the affidavit quietly resigned. The detective's testimony was buried in a sealed settlement. Emily Carter's real killer was never officially charged, despite the DNA match. The case was closed again, this time without accountability. Marcus received compensation, but no amount of money could return the years stolen, the executions he'd witnessed, or the nights spent waiting for a needle meant for his veins. He visits prisons now, sitting across from men who swear they're innocent, men the system insists are already guilty. Some of their evidence looks hauntingly familiar. The documentary ends where it began, inside the walls of death row, where cells still hold men whose convictions rest on secrets no one wants uncovered. Marcus's story wasn't an anomaly. It was a warning, because somewhere right now another innocent person is waiting for an execution date. And unless someone asks the right question at the right time, the truth may arrive too late. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.